Hello and welcome back to a very special edition of GNAT-TV's In-Depth series. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director at GNAT-TV's News Project. Pleasure to have you with us today on Thursday, February 1st. It's a great pleasure to be joined by a great group of folks here today. We're very pleased and honored to have with us Secretary of State Sarah Copeland Hanzas, who traveled down from Montpelier today to be part of this program. And also great to welcome back Chris Alfano, a student at Burton Academy, and also to welcome back in real this time as opposed to virtually, because she's been on several of our shows, but there's always a Zoom situation. Great to have with us Addie Lentzner, who's a student at Middlebury College and a former student at Arlington Memorial High School. So Addie, Chris, Sarah, great to have you all with us. Our topic today, I guess, is civics and civics engagement, but I want to turn the microphone over to you first to allow you to get us started.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for having us, and it's really good to see you both again. I am really excited to be here today, and I have a very special award that I want to share with each of you. And so I'm going to hand these to you while I talk. You can take a look at this and then maybe turn it around for the camera. The National Association of Secretaries of State allows each secretary to designate recipients of the John Lewis Youth Leadership Award. And it is my honor to present you both with this award. And you will be put into a pool of young people from across the country. And next week when we meet in Washington, D.C., some of your achievements will be presented to the rest of the secretaries and all of the assembled folks at our conference. And it'll be an opportunity for us to celebrate the work that you've done along with a whole bunch of young people from across the country. The John Lewis Award was established in 2021, and it aims to honor the extraordinary accomplishments of Congressman Lewis. And I think many of us know Congressman Lewis as, sort of the venerable statesman and, honoring the work that he's done over the years to advocate in Congress for voting rights. But what many people may not know is that he got his start in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. He was a young person who saw a problem, saw something that needed to be fixed in our world, and he dedicated himself to that at a very young age. And so I think it's really fitting to be able to hand these awards off to you, because the work that both of you have done has really gone a long way to advancing democracy, advancing civic engagement, striving towards a more equal and just union, inspiring people to step up and change the things that they see that need to be changed by getting involved and by being civically engaged people. And so you are both an inspiration to me, and I'm sure an inspiration to many of your peers. And I look forward to seeing what you will do with the rest of your life after such a wonderful start. And Andrew, I don't know if we want to just open it up for a bit more of maybe some admiration from both you and me, because I know that you are also impressed with these young people. But I'd like to talk a little bit about what each of them has done. Addie Lentzner is a first-year student at Middlebury, grew up down here in southern Vermont, and got involved advocating for policies to support populations experiencing homelessness. She is the founder and was the executive director, still the executive director of VSARN, which is the Vermont Student Anti-Racism Network, a project that she tackled in response to the death of George Floyd in 2020. The group worked with principals and guidance counselors, teachers, and librarians across the state to provide more resources on racism in schools, and to develop curriculum that members of the network teach to other young learners via Zoom. And so Addie serves as secretary on the board of directors at Bennington County Coalition and as an executive fellow for Our Turn, a youth-led movement to dismantle the structures that limit access to quality education. So, very impressive resume.
Thank you.
And Chris Alfano, senior at Burton Academy, and I hope at some point today we'll talk about what you have planned for next year because we all want to know where you're going. He's shown a passion for civic education. He's the founder of Civically, which is a smartphone app that we talked about the last time we were here in the studio together, that offers summary and practice questions on the founding documents. He was inspired to create the app that would help people understand their civic awareness following the events of the January 6th insurrection. He's also hoping to continue expanding its offerings so that it can be easily used in classroom settings, which is ideal and very much in alignment with what we're doing in our office to advance education and civic engagement. Chris also participated as the Civics Innovation Fellow through Civics Unplugged and as a legislative intern for Vermont State Representative Mike Rice, who's from the neighborhood down here. So congratulations, Chris, and thank you for your great work.
Thank you.
Well, all I can say is that I'm not surprised that these were the two who wound up emerging at the top. It's been my pleasure to get to know both of them over the past few years, I mean, I've always been deeply impressed by their depth of understanding, and all I could think was like, why wasn't I that smart when I was in high school?
Mm-hmm.
But congratulations to both of you, and congratulations to us for pulling off the surprise too, right? That was a lot of work.
That was great. I'm so glad it worked out. It's very convenient that you're both from this region of the state so that we could try to pull you here together. And thank you so much for being willing to bring us into the studio for this. You know, I'm hoping that this conversation and this the awarding of this plaque for each of these fantastic young leaders will be able to live on, and that people from across the state or maybe even across the country will be able to watch and learn what these young people have been up to, and maybe some young people will be inspired to follow in your footsteps and do the same thing. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm highly confident that's what's going to be one of the outcomes of that. But, well, so speaking of civic engagement, I guess I'd like to throw the microphone now over to the two of you and say, what are your thoughts about that? And I guess in particular, amongst your own age cohorts, do you feel that civic engagement and kind of being involved with that is something that is registering a lot with folks that you mingle with?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say, I think we're lucky to have a Secretary of State like Ms. Copeland Hanzas, who really helps emphasize this with, students, especially young people across the state of Vermont. And I think we're really fortunate to live in a state that has really easy access to voter registration. I was actually just in school earlier today, and I was talking to someone who was like, how do I register to vote? And I was like, it's so easy. It's like 3 clicks on a website, and just like that, you're ready to vote. So yeah, I think it's absolutely important for people to vote as soon as they can, and even before that to remain engaged with political and government processes. And I think we're lucky to live in a state that's really emphasizing that. And I think Vermont can really be a leader for civic engagement, especially for youth moving forward.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and I agree with your sentiments about the Secretary of State. And I think that Vermont is very lucky. I think we still have things to work on, though. I think that we need to start civic engagement a lot earlier in school and make sure that students have access to learning about voting and the history of voting and how to be civically engaged, because I don't think that I never really got that education. I remember kids in my school telling me, like, they weren't sure how to vote. They didn't know, like, the importance of it. They weren't sure if they were even going to vote. And I think that changing that through the education system could really help things. But I think by and large, like, Vermont is in a really good place. And we have a lot of youth who are really interested and who are getting involved.
It's so important, especially this year, but really all the time. And Secretary Copeland Hanzas, you're I think making an interesting initiative with encouraging 17-year-olds to get registered and vote and be able to jump right in.
Absolutely. And, many people may not realize that around a decade ago, we changed the Vermont Constitution to say that if a 17-year-old will be 18 by the general election, they can vote in the presidential primary, which is coming up on March 5th. And so it's part of the reason why I've been trying to get to as many high schools as I can get to with voter registration forms and showing them the My Voter page on the Secretary of State's website, because it really is easy to register to vote. And then once you've done that, you can show up on March 5th, or you can go into your town clerk's office anytime between now and March 5th and request your ballot and say, hey, I'm eligible to vote in the presidential primary. And, that's the first step along the process of figuring out who our next president's going to be. So I'm hoping that that's, something that will really engage people and make them want to get out and vote.
And I guess since, this award is named after, John Lewis, and I guess by coincidence or whatever, February is Black History Month. I would want to talk about that for a second, the inspiring role that John Lewis played in American political life.
Right, yeah. I mean, over the course of American history, it has been a struggle to achieve what we all want to believe our founding fathers meant when they established this democracy. And, it doesn't go unnoticed by me that 100 years ago, my grandmother had to fight for the right to vote. And John Lewis was, critical to a lot of the work that was happening in the 60s around voting rights and around not only encouraging our government systems and our laws to change so that people have access and have actual access to the ballot box, but then also encouraging people who maybe had never voted before to get up and go out and vote. And in some ways, when we look at sort of the recent history in Vermont of some elections where we have only 40% of people voting, we're going out and looking for those people who have never voted before, and we need to be using some of those same techniques to say, look, what are the challenges that you have in your community that you don't think government is helping to fix right now? Because that's what you need to be going and advocating for. You need to be going and asking the candidates, what are you going to do about affordable housing? What are you going to do about a livable wage? And then finding those candidates who support your position and your ideas about it and voting for them. And if you don't find someone who believes what you believe needs to happen, then run for office yourself. I mean, that's the other part of this, that I invite people to challenge themselves to think, if you don't think your government is doing what it needs to be doing, then step up and run.
Absolutely. I was actually lucky to hear Representative Lewis speak up in Burlington when I was in middle school, and sort of the topic of his discussion was his graphic novel March, which I highly recommend to everybody. And I think really the main takeaway that we can learn from whether it be John Lewis, Martin Luther King, or any number of civil rights advocates, is that individual agency and actions really do matter. Like you were saying, it may be running for office, but it might just be as simple as voting or educating yourself about different civic and political issues. And I think if everyone can really take that to heart and not feel helpless and so insignificant in such a big country and such a big system, then together our individual actions can amount to something greater. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely agree 100%, and I think that I wish I could have heard Congressman Lewis speak, but I think that they really, him and other civil rights activists emphasize that, our democracy is something really special, and we should be really grateful for it, and not everyone has always had the opportunity to participate in it, like you said, and I think that we need to emphasize that today and show how important it is to get young people and people of all ages, all races, all genders to the ballot box, because that is how we make change. If people don't see that their vote can make a difference, then society is never going to get better in the ways that we want it to.
Madam Secretary, I've often wondered, I look at some of the voting turnout numbers for some other countries and compare them to ours, and some countries seem to have amazingly high voter turnout, 89%. And I don't think it's because it's an authoritarian country where you kind of have to vote, otherwise you go to jail or something like that, or worse. But why is it, do you think, that we're stuck in this sort of 50 to 60% range, and we all kind of think, wow, that's great, Well, yeah, that's a little over half the we're half the people aren't making their voices heard. How do we get to that missing half of the electorate?
Right. Well, so in the 18 years that I spent serving in the Vermont House before I became Secretary of State, I would often, your job when you're running for office is to say, will you vote for me, right? And so, being willing to listen to people's answer means that sometimes you hear people say, I don't vote. And so I would always say, well, why don't you vote? And, pulling those answers out of people helped me to realize that a lot of what we have is sort of a vacuum of knowledge. It is hard to understand how our government systems work if you didn't have a good understanding of it when you went through high school. And if you've been out of high school for a long time, you may have forgotten what you learned. So this concept of education and civic engagement that our office is focused on is really going to be about how do we help people understand how government systems work, so that you can understand what's this challenge that I have, right? What is this thing that I can't solve for myself that I'm noticing in my community, and which level of government am I most likely to get some support or some help with? If it's an issue around, your public schools, then of course, you want to be going to your school board, and those people are all elected to serve on their school board, right? If it's a position or a concern about a policy that is made at the statewide level, then you need to find out who your state representative is and who your senator is. And all of that information is so much more accessible now, now that we have great websites and people can find a contact information for their representative or senator very easily. But if you don't have that basic understanding of which level of government is making the decision that I want to influence, then it can be really overwhelming and intimidating. And then of course there's the fact that it's really hard to find information about candidates now. Back 50, 75 years ago, every community had its own local paper, and the local paper had reporters who would go out and interview the people who were running for the select board or running for the school board or running for state rep or senator. And with the consolidation of print media, fewer and fewer communities have a reporter who's out there asking the questions. What are you going to do if we elect you to be our state representative? And that's why our office, with our education and civic engagement program, is going to focus on creating a voter guide for the 2020 or 2024 general election, so that when you get your ballot in the mail, you'll also get access to your voter guide, and hopefully that will help fill in some other gaps in people's understanding. And I think foundationally, one of the things that keeps people from voting is feeling that that they're alone in their problem. The fact that I am having to work 2 jobs and and I'm working so many hours a week, and I'm struggling to keep a car on the road, and I'm struggling to be able to drive those long miles back and forth, from the home that I can afford to the job that I have, and that challenge is real, but that challenge is not being experienced by one or a handful of Vermonters. That challenge is being experienced by a broad swath of Vermonters. And what we need those Vermonters to do is come together and start asking for change, right? Ask for investments in affordable housing, right? Ask for a livable wage. Ask for, a better after-school program so that you don't have to pay through the nose for after-school care for your kids. These are all things that many other civilized countries who, oh, by the way, happen to have a higher rate of participation in their democracies are providing for their citizens.
I guess I just wanted, this is a great opportunity to ask both of you, what do you see as the main issues that are on the minds of your peers? Are there 1 or 2 things in particular that really are kind of front and center, or is it an infinity of different issues?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a number of issues really at the front of youth's mind. I think climate change comes to mind, reproductive rights, gun violence are all issues that youth tend to care about. But I think the way this election is seen and the way it's being framed by the incumbent President Biden in many ways is in existential terms, right? Like President Biden has said multiple times he believes his opponent or his presumptive opponent in the general election poses a threat to democracy. And I think that message is really resonating with youth voters too, from what I've seen. People really wanting to elect a candidate that's gonna, make sure that we still have elections for the years to come, right? So, whatever your opinions are on the candidate, I think, youth voters are really appreciating this message, and I think it's going to influence how they vote. And if they vote, I think, there's a matter of persuading, but there's also matters of mobilizing, right? Which is what we're talking about a lot of times for candidates. With such low voter turnout, it's not just about saying my message is better than their message, it's just giving people a reason to go out. So I think perhaps the way this election is being framed and the way it's being seen by many youth could result in a higher turnout, but that always to be seen.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, again, like, really this election is what happens will alter our democracy. Like, it will have big effects, and I think that a lot of youth realize that, and I also think there are a lot of issues that youth see that are front of mind that they feel like if we don't address it in 2024, it's not going to get addressed. Whether that's climate change or poverty or even, a lot of things, racism, reproductive health. I think that a lot of youth see it that if we don't do something this year, like, nothing's going to change. And I think that is also really driving youth to go and vote. But I think there's still more to do to help youth realize that, like, they do have a voice in this, and that they have an ability to make change, and that their voices are powerful. And I think that centering around the fact of our democracy being kind of sacred and wanting our democracy to continue, and also highlighting these big issues that youth care about is going to get them out to vote.
Yeah, I saw some information yesterday that I thought was kind of surprising. That Gen Z and millennials together will form more than half of the voting population in 2024. And I was like, wow, because we hear so often that, we're just sort of entering this scene and maybe we have a relatively small influence compared to, the older generations. But if you think about it, if Gen Z mobilizes and, coalesces together, they really can have a really substantial impact on this election. And I think it's really important for people to understand that they're not just, a tiny insignificant number in that final vote tally. They can have quite a large impact.
Well, we saw in the 2020 election and the 2016 election how 10,000 votes in one state or another made the difference. And boy, that's an excellent point. It is true that, it doesn't take a whole lot to kind of switch an outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah, and I've heard people say that Gen Z is, I don't know if this is true, but I've heard people say Gen Z is the most empathetic generation. And I think that in ways that is true. A lot of Gen Z young people really do care about different issues and really care about the world around us. And I think that we have that going for us too.
Mm-hmm. Well, we need your voices in the mix.
Yes.
We sure do.
well, fortunately, they already are in the mix.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, boy, this has been a special day. Again, congratulations to both of you. That's
Thank you.
really great,
Thank you.
well earned, and you ought to be very proud of yourselves.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is really cool. So, good thing we got a couple of these younger Vermonters coming up to kind of
I know.
push the wheel forward.
I know, and I'm going to be very proud to show them to the rest of my colleagues at the National Association of Secretaries of State and say, look at these fabulous young leaders.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Well, thank you all for coming. Very special day here. Addie, Lentzner, Chris Alfano, Secretary of State Sarah Copeland Hanzas. We really appreciate you all coming here and allowing us to have this presentation here. This was great.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you who've been with us today. I'm sure you found this program interesting, and we definitely will see you again the next time. Meanwhile, take care.